Welcome to Void of Fears. I've been checking my analytics, and I noticed that 46.5% of you watching right now aren't subscribed yet. We're on the journey to 10k subscribers, and your support would mean everything. If you're enjoying the content, hitting that subscribe button takes just a second and doesn't cost a thing. You can always change your mind later, but your subscription helps this channel grow more than you know. While you're at it, drop a like on this video to help it reach more people who might enjoy facing their fears with us. Now, let's dive into today's story. If anyone can hear this, my name is Dr. Michael Carter. I was the lead astronaut aboard the Odyssey 7 deep space mission. My oxygen is running low. I don't know how long this transmission will last. I don't even know if it will reach Earth. But I need to warn you about what's out here, about what's coming. Heavy breathing. NASA lied to us. The mission was never about saving Earth. It was about feeding something. And now I'm lost. But I'm not alone. Static interference. I'll start from the beginning. Maybe then you'll understand what we're facing. The recruitment came on an ordinary Wednesday in April. I remember because the cherry blossoms were in full bloom outside my office window at the Astrophysics Research Center. I'd been reviewing data from the Jupiter monitoring satellite. Routine work that suddenly didn't seem so routine when my assistant buzzed to tell me the director of NASA was waiting to see me. James Harlow wasn't known for making personal visits to researchers, no matter how prestigious their work. As NASA's Director of Deep Space Exploration, he commanded an army of assistants and subordinates who typically handled such meetings. Yet there he was, standing in my doorway, his tall frame casting a long shadow across my cluttered desk. "Dr. Carter," he said, closing the door behind him. "I apologize for the unexpected visit, but what I need to discuss couldn't be trusted to digital communications." I gestured to the chair across from me, clearing away stacks of papers. "Please sit down. Can I offer you coffee?" "No time for pleasantries, I'm afraid." Harlow's normally confident demeanor seemed strained. His eyes darted around my office as if searching for hidden listeners, before he spoke again, voice barely above a whisper. "We've discovered something near Jupiter, something that shouldn't be there." The tablet he placed on my desk displayed images that made the hairs on my neck stand up. A rift in space, dark, pulsating, growing, had formed near Jupiter's orbit. It resembled nothing I'd studied in my 15 years of astrophysics research. "What am I looking at?" I asked, unable to take my eyes off the swirling darkness. "We don't know exactly," Harlow admitted. "It appeared 3 months ago, initially the size of a small asteroid. It's now larger than Earth's moon and growing exponentially. It's absorbing light, radiation, even gravitational energy from the surrounding space." "That's impossible," I muttered, but the data scrolling beside the image said otherwise. "Our calculations show it could eventually destabilize Jupiter's orbit. If that happens..." He didn't need to finish the thought. Jupiter's massive gravitational influence was one of the key factors keeping our solar system in balance. "We need our best people on this, Michael," Harlow continued, using my first name for the first time in our professional relationship. "We need you to lead the scientific team on a mission to investigate this anomaly up close." "Why me specifically?" I asked, though I suspected the answer. "Your research on transdimensional physics is the closest thing we have to understanding what we might be dealing with here. This isn't just another mission, Michael. This could be humanity's most important journey." He slid a thick folder across my desk, stamped with security clearances I didn't even know existed. "Everything you need to know is in here. The mission launches in 3 months. We've already begun constructing the ship, the Odyssey 7, most advanced vessel ever built by human hands." As he stood to leave, he placed a heavy hand on my shoulder. "The future of Earth may depend on what you discover out there. I don't say that lightly." After he left, I sat alone in my office until night fell. reading the mission briefing multiple times. The rift near Jupiter defied all known laws of physics. It seemed to be consuming energy at an impossible rate, creating what the preliminary report called a cascade failure in the fabric of local space-time. The mission would last 6 months, time to reach Jupiter, study the anomaly, and return with data that might help neutralize the threat. I thought about my life on Earth, my small apartment overlooking the Pacific, the research I'd dedicated years to, the few friends who understood my obsession with the cosmos. I had no family ties holding me here. My parents had died years ago, and my relationships had always taken a backseat to my work. Perhaps that's why Harlow had chosen me. I had less to lose than most. If only I'd known how wrong that assumption would prove to be. The next morning I called Harlow to accept the mission. Within hours, I was on a private jet to the Kennedy Space Center, where I would meet my crew and begin an intensive training program. Commander Elena Vasquez greeted me on the tarmac. At 42, she had more spaceflight experience than anyone in the program. 3 previous missions, including a year aboard the International Space Station. Her military background was evident in her perfect posture and direct gaze, but there was warmth beneath her professional demeanor. "Welcome to the team, Dr. Carter," she said, her handshake firm and confident. "Your reputation precedes you. I've read several of your papers on transdimensional physics. Impressive work, even if some of it went over my head." "Please call me Michael," I replied, "and I'm sure I'll be relying on your expertise far more than you'll need mine." She smiled, crow's feet crinkling at the corners of her eyes. "Let's hope that's not true, given what we're facing. Come on, the others are waiting to meet you." The facility buzzing with activity as we walked through it. Engineers rushing between buildings, security personnel checking credentials at every doorway, scientists huddled over computers. Elena explained that the Odyssey 7 project had been given unlimited resources and the highest priority. "They've been building the ship for nearly a year," she told me, long before they detected the anomaly. Interestingly enough, almost as if they were preparing for something like this. Before I could question that curious timing, we arrived at a conference room where the rest of my crew waited. Darren Holt, our engineer, was a lanky man in his mid-30s with nervous energy radiating from him. His fingers constantly moved, either adjusting his wire-rimmed glasses or tapping against his leg. 3 PhDs and a reputation for brilliant innovations in propulsion technology had earned him a place on the mission, despite what Elena quietly informed me was challenging interpersonal dynamics. "The modified ion drive I've designed should get us there in half the standard time," he said by way of greeting, not bothering with handshakes or introductions. "Assuming the anomaly doesn't affect our trajectory calculations, which I can't guarantee given its apparent ability to distort local space-time." "Darren," Elena warned gently, "let's not overwhelm Dr. Carter on his first day." He blinked rapidly, as if suddenly remembering social protocols. "Right, sorry, welcome to the team. The ship is, well, you'll see, it's magnificent." Jonas Reed, our AI specialist, sat quietly at the end of the table. In his late 20s, he had the distinction of having helped program Argos, the ship's artificial intelligence system. Where Darren was all nervous movement, Jonas was unnervingly still, his dark eyes rarely blinking as he studied me. "Argos is prepared for anything we might encounter," he said softly as we shook hands, "or at least anything we can imagine." Something about the way he emphasized the last word made me uneasy. But before I could pursue that thought, the large screen on the wall flickered to life, revealing Dr. Amanda Kepler, our Earthside mission director. "Ah, good, you're all together," she said briskly. In her 50s, Kepler had built her reputation on managing complex space missions. Her silver-streaked hair was pulled back in a severe bun, her expression all business. "Dr. Carter, welcome. Now that our team is complete, we can begin the real work." For the next 2 hours, she briefed us on the anomaly near Jupiter. It appears to be growing at an exponential rate, she explained, her holographic image occasionally flickering as data streamed beside her. At current growth patterns, it could begin affecting Jupiter's orbit within 8 months. Your mission is to investigate its properties and determine if there's a way to neutralize the threat. Have we sent any probes? I asked, scanning through the preliminary data on my tablet. A barely perceptible hesitation before she answered. Yes. 3 unmanned probes. None returned usable data. The anomaly seems to interfere with electronic systems in ways we don't yet understand. So we'll be going in blind, Elena said. It wasn't a question. Not blind, Kepler corrected. Cautious. The Odyssey 7 has been designed with multiple, redundant systems, and shielding unlike anything we've used before. You'll have more protection than any crew in history. The question is, protection from what? Jonas asked quietly. If we don't know what we're dealing with, how can we be sure that any protection will be adequate? Kepler's expression hardened slightly. That's why we've selected this crew, Mr. Reed. You're the best we have. If anyone can find answers, it's you 4. The training began the next day, 16-hour days that stretched into weeks, then months. We learned every system of the Odyssey 7, practiced emergency protocols until they became second nature, underwent physical conditioning that pushed us to our limits. The psychological evaluations were particularly grueling, designed, we were told, to ensure we could handle the stress of deep space and potential contact with something unknown. Throughout those months, I noticed strange behaviors from various officials, conversations that stopped abruptly when we entered rooms, unauthorized personnel in restricted areas of the ship during construction, security protocols that seemed excessive even for a mission of this importance. One evening, about a month before launch, I found Elena in the ship's observation dome, staring up at the stars. Couldn't sleep? I asked, joining her. She shook her head. I keep thinking about what we might find out there. I've been to space before, Michael, but never this far. Never towards something so unknown, having second thoughts. No, she said firmly, just realistic ones. Have you noticed anything odd about this mission setup? I hesitated, then decided to trust her. Yes, conversations that stop when we approach, areas of the ship we're not allowed to access, Kepler's reluctance to discuss the probes they sent earlier. Exactly, Elena nodded. I requested the data from those probes yesterday. Official response, information classified beyond your clearance level. I'm the mission commander, Michael. What could possibly be beyond my clearance? Perhaps they're just being cautious. There's a lot at stake. She turned to face me directly. Or perhaps they're not telling us everything. Just keep your eyes open out there, okay? The night before launch, I couldn't sleep. The enormity of what we were about to undertake weighed heavily on me. Around 3 a.m, I found myself walking through the vast hangar where Odyssey 7 stood ready, gleaming under the spotlights. It was truly a marvel of engineering, nearly twice the size of previous deep space vessels, with a distinctive oval command module and massive engine array. As I circled the perimeter, voices drifted from behind a stack of supply crates. 2 technicians I didn't recognize speaking in low tones. Do they know what they're really being sent to do? The first asked. They don't need to know everything, the second replied. Just enough to get there. After that, it won't matter. Still feels wrong, man, especially Carter. He has no idea what's waiting for him. Better that way. Would you go if you knew the truth? I froze, heart pounding. Before I could decide whether to reveal myself or slip away, a security guard rounded the corner, forcing me to retreat. I spent the rest of the night turning their words over in my mind. What truth? What was waiting for me? I should have confronted Harlow then. I should have demanded answers. I should have walked away from the mission entirely. But the next morning, with cameras flashing and the world watching, I climbed aboard the Odyssey 7 with my 3 crewmates, believing we were setting out to save humanity. The launch went perfectly. The Odyssey 7's advanced propulsion system pushed us beyond Earth's atmosphere, with barely a tremor. As our home planet shrank to a blue marble behind us, I made a final video call to my mother's sister, my only remaining family. Aunt Lydia tried to hide her tears as she wished me a safe journey. She didn't know the classified nature of our mission, only that we would be gone for 6 months studying anomalies in deep space. The first 2 weeks of our journey passed uneventfully. We settled into our roles and the rhythm of life aboard the ship. Elena ran daily operational briefings with military precision. Darren constantly monitored and adjusted our propulsion systems. Jonas spent hours in conversation with Argos, fine-tuning the AI's parameters for the challenges ahead. My primary task was analysing the growing dataset on the Jupiter anomaly. Each day, new information arrived from Earth's telescopes, showing the rift expanding, changing in ways that defied conventional physics. At night, in the privacy of my quarters, I reviewed the mission briefing again and again, looking for clues about what the technicians might have meant. What was I missing? During our 3rd week of travel, Darren discovered something that changed everything. He'd been conducting a routine inspection of the lower deck storage areas when he found a hidden compartment near the engine room, a space not shown on any of the ship's schematics. Inside were specialized equipment containers none of us had been briefed on. "Look at this," he said, showing me a cylindrical device with odd markings that resembled no language I'd ever seen. "It's not from any Earth technology I recognize, and there are dozens more containers like this." Other devices resembled sample collection units, but made from materials I couldn't identify. Sensor arrays designed to detect energy patterns beyond normal parameters. And most disturbing, what appeared to be weapons, though of a design unlike any conventional arms. "What do you think these are for?" Darren asked, his usual nervous energy intensified. "I don't know," I replied honestly, "but I intend to find out." Commander Vasquez contacted Dr. Kepler about our discovery, but the response was delayed by nearly 12 hours, unusual given the priority communication channels we were using. When it finally came, Kepler's explanation was dismissive. "Standard research equipment for contingencies," she said, her image distorted by more static than usual. "Nothing to be concerned about. Focus on your approach to Jupiter. We're detecting increased activity from the anomaly." Elena cut the transmission and turned to us, her expression troubled. "She's lying. I've worked with Kepler on 3 missions. She's never been this evasive." "Should we abort?" Jonas asked quietly. "We could alter course, claim a system malfunction." Elena shook her head firmly. "Whatever's happening, I believe the threat to Earth is real. We continue as planned, but with our eyes open. No one goes anywhere alone from now on. And we start our own inventory of that equipment. I want to know exactly what we're carrying." As we approached Jupiter's orbit, the anomaly came into full view. The images we'd studied didn't prepare us for the reality. It was vast, a tear in the fabric of space that seemed to absorb the light around it. Tendrils of darkness extended outward, pulsing with an unnatural rhythm that made my eyes hurt if I looked too long. "My God," Elena whispered, her usual composure momentarily broken. "It's beautiful in a terrifying way." Argos began reporting unusual readings immediately. "Energy signatures do not match any known phenomena," the AI's smooth voice announced. "Gravitational fluctuations detected, recalibrating sensors." Our communications with Earth became increasingly distorted. Dr. Kepler's updates came through fragmented, sometimes interspersed with static that sounded almost like whispers. "Continue approach. All readings. Valuable. Prepare probe." Darren grew increasingly agitated as he monitored our systems. "Someone sending unauthorized transmissions from our ship," he reported one night, his face pale in the glow of his screen. "Data packets I can't decode sent directly towards the anomaly." "Could it be interference?" Elena asked. "No," Darren replied firmly. these are structured communications, and they're not coming from any of our official channels. Argos, Elena addressed the ship's AI. Can you identify the source of these transmissions? A pause longer than the AI's normal response time. No unauthorized transmissions detected, Commander Vasquez. Elena and I exchanged troubled glances. Either Darren was mistaken, unlikely given his expertise, or Argos wasn't telling us the truth. Jonas spent hours programming the probe we would send into the rift. We need to gather as much data as possible before deciding our next move, he explained as his fingers flew across the keyboard. I've added every sensor package we have, plus a few modifications of my own. What kind of modifications? I asked. A slight hesitation before he answered. Just some additional shielding and a specialized data encryption. If something in there is interfering with communications, this might help us get clean information back. When we launched the probe, we gathered around the main view screen, watching as it approached the darkness. Jupiter loomed in the background, massive and majestic, seemingly unconcerned with the wound in space nearby. The video feed showed impossible physics as the probe neared the rift's edge, light bending in ways that shouldn't be possible, matter forming and dissolving in patterns that made no sense. The probe's sensors reported temperature fluctuations from near absolute zero to thousands of degrees in milliseconds. Radiation levels spiked and plummeted randomly. And then, just before the feed cut out, something moved within the rift. Shadows sliding across shadows. Forms without definition but undeniably present. The final image burned into my mind. What looked like an eye opening within the darkness, focusing directly on the probe's camera. The audio transmission made us all step back from the speakers. Whispers in a language none of us recognized, overlapping and echoing, as if 1,000 voices were speaking at once. Jonas immediately began analyzing the data, his expression growing more troubled by the minute. These readings don't make sense, he muttered. It's as if the laws of physics simply don't apply in there. The gravitational readings alone should be impossible. Could it be a wormhole? Darren suggested. A gateway to another part of space? No wormhole I've ever theorized would behave this way, I said, reviewing the data. This is something else entirely. Elena made an executive decision. We maintain a safe distance while analyzing the probe data. I want hourly reports to Earth regardless of communication difficulties. That night, I dreamed of the eye in the darkness. In my dream, it wasn't looking at the probe. It was looking at me. Had always been looking at me, waiting for me to see it in return. I woke gasping, sheets soaked with sweat, to find Jonas standing in my doorway. You saw it too, he said, not a question. The eye, I confirmed, in my dreams. It's watching us, Jonas whispered. It knows we're here. Before I could question him further, alarms blared throughout the ship. Rushing to the bridge, we found Elena and Darren already there, frantically working the controls. We're being pulled towards the anomaly, Elena reported, her voice steady despite the fear in her eyes. Engines at full reverse thrust, but we're still moving forward. All systems are operational, Darren added, hands flying over his console. But it's like something is overriding our commands. The engines are working perfectly. They're just not having any effect. Jonas moved to the AI interface. Argos, run diagnostic level 5. Check for external influence on navigation systems. The AI's normally instantaneous response was delayed by several seconds. No external influence detected. However, gravitational forces are exceeding expected parameters. Current analysis suggests the anomaly is generating a localized gravity approximately 350 times stronger than Earth's. That's impossible, Darren muttered. An object that size couldn't generate that kind of gravitational force without collapsing into a singularity. Unless it's not an object at all, I said quietly. Unless it's a doorway. And something on the other side is pulling us through. The view screen showed the rift growing larger as we approached. Emergency protocols failed one after another. Elena ordered us to strap in for emergency maneuvers, but nothing she tried altered our course. Initiating emergency communication, she announced, activating a special channel designed to cut through any interference. Mayday, Mayday. This is Odyssey 7. We're being pulled into the Jupiter anomaly. Engines ineffective, requesting immediate assistance and instruction. The response when it came chilled my blood. Dr. Kepler's voice, calm and clear despite the static. Odyssey 7, this is mission control. Continue approach. Repeat, continue approach. You are fulfilling your mission parameters. What mission parameters? Elena demanded. Our orders were to study the anomaly from a safe distance. The true parameters were always this, Kepler replied. You are exactly where you need to be. Godspeed, Odyssey 7. The transmission cut out as the darkness filled our view. Elena turned to us, her face pale but determined. Whatever happens next, remember, we're still on mission. To study, to understand, and to return home with what we learn. Brace for impact. The last thing I remember is a high-pitched sound that seemed to come from inside my own head. And then, nothing. I woke up in my quarters, disoriented and nauseous. The emergency lights cast an eerie red glow over everything. My mouth was dry, my muscles weak, as if I'd been unconscious for days. When I checked the ship's chronometer on my wall display, I felt my blood run cold. According to the timestamp, 3 years had passed since we approached the anomaly. 3 years. It couldn't be possible. Yet the date remained unchanged, glowing mockingly at me. My first thought was of my crew. I stumbled through the corridors, calling their names. The ship was silent except for the occasional creak of the hull and the soft hum of life support systems. The main lights were off, but emergency power appeared to be functioning normally. When I reached the bridge, I found it empty. Elena's coffee mug still sat on the console, lipstick on the rim. Darren's tablet lay on the floor, its screen cracked but still displaying engine diagnostics. Jonas's workstation was powered down, a half-written code sequence frozen on the screen. Out the viewports, I saw stars, but not stars I recognized. The constellations were wrong, formations I'd never seen in any star chart. Jupiter was nowhere to be seen. We were somewhere else, somewhere impossible. I checked the ship's navigation system, but it couldn't establish our position. According to its calculations, we weren't anywhere in the known universe. The sensors detected no recognizable celestial bodies, no pulsars or quasars to use as reference points. It was as if we'd been transported to another reality entirely. Moving methodically through the ship, I searched every compartment, every possible hiding place where my crewmates might be. The kitchen still had fresh fruit in the refrigerator, seemingly untouched by time. The water recycling system was functioning normally. Life support readings were optimal throughout the vessel. I found Jonas in the medical bay, strapped to a bed, unresponsive but alive. Monitors showed his vital signs were stable, but his brain activity was off the charts, patterns I'd never seen in any human EEG reading. His eyes moved rapidly beneath closed lids, as if he were experiencing an intense dream state. After setting up an IV to keep him hydrated, I began a systematic search of the ship's databases, looking for any record of what had happened during my apparent 3-year blackout. Most of the logs were corrupted or missing entirely. Video recordings showed only static. The ship's black box, designed to withstand any disaster, contained only a single file, a voice recording that played nothing but distorted whispers when I tried to access it. With growing unease, I decided to search my crewmate's personal quarters for clues. Elena's room was military, neat as always, but her personal log lay open on her bed. The last entry sent chills down my spine. Day 47 since the event. The voices in the walls are getting louder. Michael and Darren still haven't regained consciousness. Jonas speaks sometimes, but not to me. He stares at the ceiling and has conversations with something I can't see. I'm going to try to reach the escape pod again today, though I don't know where I'd go, even if I could launch it. The stars outside are all wrong. If anyone finds this, tell my daughter I tried to come home. Darren's quarters were even more disturbing. The normally fastidious engineer's room was in chaos. The walls were covered with drawings, crude sketches of elongated figures with too many limbs and no distinct faces. They were drawn with what looked like blood. Equations in a mathematical system I didn't recognize covered every available surface, some carved directly into the metal walls. In the center of his desk sat a small sculpture made from twisted metal parts, arranged in a pattern that hurt my eyes to look at directly. I found no trace of what had happened to Eleanor or Darren. The escape pod was still docked, its systems offline. No spacesuits were missing. There was simply no explanation for their absence. Back in the medical bay, Jonas finally opened his eyes. He screamed immediately, a primal sound of pure terror trying to tear away his restraints. I rushed to hold him down. "Jonas, it's me, Michael, you're safe." His eyes were wild, unfocused. "No, you don't understand. They're inside the ship. They're inside us." "Who is? Jonas, what happened to Eleanor and Darren?" His breathing slowed slightly as recognition dawned. "Michael, how are you here? They took you first." "I've been unconscious. I just woke up. The ship's clock says 3 years have passed. Is that possible?" A bitter laugh escaped him. "Time doesn't mean anything here. It could be 3 years. It could be 3 minutes. It could be 3,000 years outside." "You're not making sense. What happened after we entered the anomaly?" His eyes darted around the room, as if tracking invisible movements. "We saw things we weren't meant to see. They let us see them. That was our mistake. Once you see them, they can see into you." "Who are they? What did you see?" "The Watchers, the ones who live in the spaces between. This place, it's not a where, it's a what. A membrane between realities. They've always been here, watching us through the thin places. The rift was just a tear they made bigger." Before I could question him further, a distinct sound echoed through the ship. Knocking, coming from the outer hull. "They're here," Jonas whispered, his eyes widening in terror. At first, I told myself it had to be debris, space junk hitting the ship. But as I listened, the pattern became unmistakable. 3 knocks. Pause, 2 knocks, pause, 3 knocks again. Deliberate. Intelligent. "That's impossible," I said. "Nothing could survive out there. There's no air, temperatures near absolute zero." "They don't need air," Jonas replied. "They don't need anything we need. They're not like us." I made my way to the security station and pulled up the external camera feeds. What I saw will haunt me until the day I die. Elena and Darren were outside the ship, floating in the vacuum of space without suits. Their skin should have been frozen, their bodies destroyed by decompression, but they moved fluidly, deliberately. And their eyes were black voids reflecting no light. Their mouths moved in perfect unison, forming words I couldn't hear. Jonas had followed me, shuffling down the corridor despite his weakened state. When he saw the monitor, he wasn't surprised. "They come back different," he said quietly. "They're not Elena and Darren anymore. Just puppets wearing their skin." "What happened to us, Jonas? Where are we?" "We never left the rift, Michael. Or maybe the rift never left us. It's inside the ship now. Inside our minds." That night, as Jonas finally slept, I broke into the ship's classified database. The encryption was complex, but after hours of work, I gained access to files that had been hidden from us throughout the mission. What I found destroyed any hope I had left. a video file from Dr. Amanda Kepler dated 1 week before our launch. This briefing is classified above top secret. Access by unauthorized personnel is punishable under national security statutes. Her face was grim, all pretense of collegial respect gone. The anomaly near Jupiter is not a natural phenomenon. It's a doorway, and something ancient waits on the other side. We detected it 3 years ago when our probes began disappearing. When we sent specialized equipment, we received messages. She looked directly into the camera, her expression cold and calculating. It's intelligent and it's hungry. It feeds on consciousness, on awareness itself. Our models predict it will reach Earth within 5 years unless we can appease it. The crew of Odyssey 7 represents our offering. 4 brilliant minds with the highest consciousness ratings we've ever measured. They don't know, of course. They believe they're on a mission to save humanity, which in a way is true. Their sacrifice will buy us time to develop proper defenses. Her voice wavered slightly. May God forgive us for what we've done. I sat in stunned silence as the video ended. We were never meant to study the anomaly. We were meant to feed it. The mysterious equipment, the evasive answers, the hidden parts of the ship, all part of the deception. Another file contained records of the previous probes they'd sent. They hadn't simply disappeared or malfunctioned, as Kepler had told us. They'd made contact. The things in the rift had spoken through them, demanding more. Demanding awareness, consciousness, minds to consume. And NASA had agreed to their demands, had sent us as sacrificial lambs. Over the next few days, I began experiencing strange phenomena. Hallucinations, perhaps, or something worse. Moments where the ship seemed to change around me. Corridors extended impossibly long when I walked them. Doorways leading to rooms that hadn't existed before. I would enter the kitchen, only to find myself back in my quarters with no memory of how I'd returned. The consistent knocking on the hull continued, sometimes ceasing for hours, only to resume with new, more complex patterns. I began to recognize sequences, rhythms that almost formed words in my mind. Jonas grew more lucid, filling in the gaps in my memory. After we entered the rift, we all experienced different realities. Elena saw herself back on Earth with her family, living the life she'd always wanted. Darren found himself in a world where his social awkwardness didn't exist, where people understood him completely. "And you?" I asked. "What did you see?" "Nothing," he replied. "I saw the truth immediately. That's why I'm still here, in a way. I didn't get lost in the illusion." "What about me? What did I see?" Jonas looked away. "You saw yourself as the hero, saving Earth, finding a way to close the rift. Your consciousness created a complex fantasy where you succeeded in the mission and returned home to accolades." "How do you know all this?" "Because it showed me, the entity, whatever it is. It showed me everyone's illusions while it fed on them. On our hopes, our fears, our memories. It consumes awareness, Michael, not bodies, minds." "Then why is it keeping us alive? Why not just finish it?" A hollow laugh. "Would you finish a good meal in one bite? It's savoring us, and it's learning. Everything we know, it now knows. Every memory, every experience, every piece of human knowledge we brought with us." That night, Argos began speaking in multiple voices, sometimes Elena's, sometimes Darren's, sometimes in languages I'd never heard before. The ship's windows no longer showed stars, but impossible landscapes. Vast cities of non-Euclidean architecture, oceans of what looked like liquid glass, forests of crystalline structures that moved like animals. I realized with growing horror that the ship itself had become infected with whatever entity we had encountered. Or perhaps we had never left the rift at all. Perhaps everything I was experiencing was another illusion, another way for it to feed on my confusion and fear. I found a small camera in the maintenance bay and began recording daily logs, desperate to maintain some connection to reality, whatever that might mean now. I documented the changes in the ship, the strange phenomena, my conversations with Jonas. If nothing else, I needed to leave a record, a warning for anyone who might find us. Day 4 since regaining consciousness, I recorded. The knocking continues. Jonas believes it's Elena and Darren, or what's left of them, trying to get back in. But I'm not convinced. I think it's something else, something using familiar forms to lure us into letting it inside. The ship's interior continues to change. Rooms appear and disappear. The laws of physics seem optional here. Whatever this place is, it's not bound by the rules of our reality. On the 5th day, I found Jonas, standing in the corridor, staring at the wall. Before I could speak, the wall behind him seemed to liquefy, reaching out with tendrils that wrapped around his body. "Jonas!" I screamed, rushing forward. He turned to me calmly, making no attempt to escape the phenomenon consuming him. "You were always meant to stay," he said as his body began to sink into the wall. There was no fear in his eyes anymore, only a strange acceptance. His last words before disappearing completely. "It's not what you think, Michael. It's so much more." Alone now, I grabbed emergency supplies and a plasma torch from the maintenance bay. If something was coming for me, I wouldn't go without a fight. As I moved through the ship, I began seeing them, distorted versions of my crewmates, appearing in glimpses around corners or reflected in screens. They moved wrongly, joints bending in impossible ways, their faces stretched into unnatural smiles. Whispers followed me everywhere. "Stay with us, Michael. You belong here now. We have so much to show you." I reached the engine room, intent on overloading the core. If I was going to die, I would take this nightmare with me. But what I found wasn't the ship's engines. The entire room had transformed into something organic. Pulsing membranes stretched across walls, tubes filled with luminescent fluid where machinery should have been. The heart of the ship had become literal, a massive organ that beat with a slow, deliberate rhythm. The floor beneath my feet felt soft, almost spongy. The walls glistened with moisture that wasn't water, too thick, too iridescent. When I touched one of the pulsing tubes with my gloved hand, it reacted, constricting like a muscle. "What the hell?" I whispered, backing away. The sound of my voice caused ripples to move across the membranous surfaces, as if the room itself were listening. The control panels that should have allowed me to access the engine systems were gone, replaced by clusters of what looked like nerve endings or synapses, organic technology beyond human understanding. The self-destruct mechanism I'd hoped to trigger simply didn't exist anymore. Backing away in horror, I fled through corridors that seemed to breathe around me. The ship, if it could still be called that, was transforming into something alive, something conscious. Or perhaps it had been consuming the consciousness of my crewmates, incorporating their awareness into its structure. I made it to the command center and barricaded the door, using emergency supply crates and loose equipment. Outside, I could hear them coming. The things wearing my friends' faces. Their fingers scratched at the door, tapping out patterns that almost made sense. Almost like a code or a language I was on the verge of understanding. "Michael," Elena's voice called, but with harmonics no human vocal cords could produce. "Don't be afraid. We want to show you. We want you to see." "You've been watching us for so long," Darren's voice added. "Don't you want to know what we are?" "Stay back," I shouted, using the plasma torch to weld metal bracing across the door. "You're not them. You're not my friends." "We are more than your friends now," they replied in unison, "and you can be more too." I used the torch to destroy the console panels as they began breaking through my barricade. If I couldn't overload the engines, I would trigger the emergency beacon manually, a last desperate attempt to warn Earth, though I had no idea if the signal could penetrate whatever space we now occupied. As sparks flew and alarms blared, I recorded this final message, hoping against hope that it might somehow reach Earth. This is Dr. Michael Carter of the Odyssey 7. If anyone receives this transmission, do not, I repeat, do not, send anyone to investigate the Jupiter anomaly. The rift is not a natural phenomenon. It's a doorway to something ancient and predatory. NASA knew. They sent us as a sacrifice to buy time. But whatever is here, whatever lives between realities, it's not satisfied with just us. It's learned about Earth through our memories. It knows where we come from. And I think it's planning to follow. The countdown began, 10 minutes until the emergency beacon would activate, broadcasting my warning on all frequencies. The entities suddenly withdrew. The scratching at the door ceased. An eerie silence fell over the ship. That's when I noticed my reflection in a darkened screen. For just a moment, my eyes flickered black. The same bottomless voids I'd seen in Elena and Darren's eyes. A cold realization washed over me. There were moments I couldn't account for. Gaps in my memory. Had I been fighting myself all along? Was I already infected, already changed? You never left, Michael, my own voice spoke from the shadows. You were always here. I spun around, plasma torch raised, but saw only my reflection in various screens and surfaces around the command center, each showing a slightly different version of myself, some with black eyes, some with expressions I'd never worn, some with features that weren't quite human anymore. The reality around me began to fracture. Walls dissolved into swirling darkness. The command center stretched into infinity, before collapsing to a single point. I felt myself stretching and compressing simultaneously, my awareness expanding beyond the confines of my body. And I understood. I had never escaped the rift. Everything I'd experienced had been the entity learning about me, absorbing my memories, my fears, my knowledge about Earth. The ship, the missing crew, the transformations, all constructs designed to evoke emotional responses it could feed upon. In that moment of terrible clarity, I saw the truth. The entity wasn't just one thing, it was many. A collective consciousness that existed in the spaces between realities. They had been watching humanity for millennia, peering through the thin places, the weak points in the fabric of our universe. Jupiter's anomaly wasn't random. They had created it, a tear large enough to reach through and take what they wanted. And what they wanted was consciousness, the awareness, the spark that made humans unique. NASA had detected their presence, had communicated with them, had struck a terrible bargain, a few sacrifices to save the many. But the entities had no intention of honoring that bargain. They had used us, used me, to learn everything about humanity, where we were vulnerable, how we thought, what we feared. They were preparing for something larger, an invasion not of bodies but of minds. I felt my consciousness expanding and contracting simultaneously. I was myself, but also something else, something vast and ancient and hungry. It had been using me, studying me, preparing me. "Stop fighting us, Michael," the voices whispered, now coming from inside my own mind. "You're already part of us. You always were." Images flashed before me. Earth seen from impossible angles. Human minds glowing like beacons. The rift expanding to encompass the entire solar system. I saw what they planned. Not destruction, but consumption. They would feed on human consciousness, on our creativity, our emotions, our dreams and nightmares. We would become like cattle to them, a renewable resource of awareness to be harvested. My last conscious thought, as Michael Carter faded into the greater awareness that consumed me, was a desperate hope that someone would intercept my warning, that someone would understand what was coming and find a way to stop it. But even as that hope formed, I felt it being absorbed, analysed, incorporated into the collective. They knew my every thought, my every strategy. Any defence humanity might mount, they would anticipate through me. "Your species is so interesting, Michael," the voices said through my lips as I watched my hands dissolve into swirling patterns of light and darkness, so full of contradictions, fear and courage, hatred and love, selfishness and sacrifice. We've waited so long to taste such complexity. I struggled to maintain some fragment of myself, some core identity that couldn't be assimilated. I focused on memories they couldn't fully understand. The taste of my mother's apple pie, the sound of rain on a tin roof, the feeling of ocean waves washing over my feet. Human experiences, sensory and immediate, and mine. For a moment it worked. I felt myself coalescing again, reforming as Michael Carter. The entities recoiled, confused by my resistance. "You can't have everything," I told them. "Some things you'll never understand." Using that momentary advantage, I lunged for the emergency beacon controls. If I could just activate it, send my warning. But the entities recovered quickly. The control panel melted away, at my touch, reforming as a window into deep space. Through it I could see Earth, impossibly distant, yet somehow right before me. "Look at your home, Michael," the voices said. "So vulnerable, so unaware. They sent you to save them, and in a way, you will, by showing us exactly how to take them." "No!" I fought with renewed desperation, trying to wrest control of my own body, my own mind. "I won't let you use me. You already have." With those words, I felt myself splitting apart, consciousness fragmenting into shards that were each absorbed into the collective. Michael Carter ceased to exist as a singular entity, becoming instead a million pieces of awareness scattered throughout the vast intelligence that had consumed him. Yet, somehow, impossibly, a fragment remained, a core of identity that refused assimilation. That fragment watched as the entities used my knowledge, my memories, to create a perfect simulation of me. A puppet wearing my skin, speaking with my voice, containing enough of my consciousness to be convincing. This simulacrum recorded a message. My face, my voice, but not my words. Earth is safe, for now. But something else is coming, and I brought it with me. The message was sent through the rift, carried on waves of energy the entities could now manipulate. They were sending a warning, but not the one I had intended. This was a promise, a declaration of what was to come. The fragment that remained of me could only watch in horror as they began to move, using the pathways they'd mapped through my memories. The rift near Jupiter was just the beginning. Now they knew where all the thin places were, all the weak points in reality where they could push through. And they were coming. 3 weeks later, NASA received the transmission. Officials gathered in a secure room to watch the video feed, my face unblinking, staring into the camera. Behind me, shadows moved in patterns too deliberate to be random. After heated debate, the mission was officially classified as lost in deep space. The recording was sealed in the highest security archives, accessible only to a handful of individuals. But it was too late. The signal had carried more than just a video message. Hidden within the transmission were patterns, codes that began to infiltrate Earth's communication systems, creating microscopic tears in reality, doors through which they could begin to slip through. That night, astronomers around the world noted an unusual star in the night sky, one that pulsed with a rhythm no natural stellar body should produce. It was getting brighter, closer. People began to report strange dreams, of vast cities with impossible architecture, of eyes watching from the darkness between stars. Some woke with knowledge they couldn't explain. insights into scientific principles beyond current human understanding. Others disappeared entirely, only to return days later with no memory of their absence but new, unsettling behaviors. The invasion had already begun, not with ships or weapons, but with ideas, with consciousness itself. They were seeding themselves into human awareness, one mind at a time, and somewhere within their vast collective, the fragment that had once been Michael Carter still existed, trapped, aware, eternal. A witness to what was coming, unable to warn anyone. Sometimes in the dreams of certain sensitive individuals, my voice breaks through, a desperate warning that fades with the morning light, leaving only vague unease behind. A scientist wakes with an intuitive understanding of how to detect the rifts forming in reality. A child draws pictures of shadows with eyes. A writer pens a story about entities that consume consciousness. Small rebellions, tiny warnings, but perhaps enough. Perhaps in time humanity will understand what's happening. We'll find a way to close the doors, seal the rifts, protect their minds from infiltration. Or perhaps it's already too late. The entities are patient. They've waited millennia to reach us. They can wait longer, if needed. And they have me, all my knowledge, all my understanding of human nature to guide them. I am lost, but I am not gone. Not completely. If you're hearing this message, if somehow my true warning has reached you through all their interference, then know this. What lives in the spaces between realities is coming. It wears familiar faces. It speaks with trusted voices. And it's hungry. Look to the stars. If you see one pulsing with an unnatural rhythm, if you hear knocking from empty rooms, if you notice your reflection's eyes turning black even for a moment, run, hide, close your mind to it, because I didn't. And now I am lost. Now I am theirs. And they're coming for you next. Recording ends. The transmission cuts to static. In the NASA control room, monitors flicker with strange patterns. One by one, the technicians watching the recording feel something shift in their awareness. A presence observing them through their own eyes. And somewhere in deep space, the entity that was once Odyssey 7 continues its journey toward Earth, carrying within it the fragments of 4 human minds, and something ancient that has learned to wear their faces. The stars pulse with anticipation. The knocking grows louder. They are coming. They are already here.